Seattle Seahawks, who came into a game that some thought maybe should have been an easy one, a runaway, a blowout, whatever have you, however you want to describe it. Expand your vocabulary as much as you want. But it's a division rival. These NFC West games, especially against the Arizona Cardinals, always seem to be a bit wild. And that was once again the case in the Seahawks. Week 7, 20-10 win over the Arizona Cardinals. This one was a little bizarre. DK Metcalf missed the first game in his career as a Seattle Seahawk. So Seattle relied heavily on Jake Bobo to come in and fill in some of that missing aspect that DK brings. Tyler Lockett had a nice game as well. In addition, I talk about Bobo and the undrafted rookie that he is. Seattle's 20th overall pick in this past draft, Jackson Smith-Njigba, had a nice game as well. He scored his first NFL touchdown. But when we look at it, I'm getting ahead of myself there. We won't talk about players of the game just yet. A little bit bizarre. The Seahawks defense continues to look good after building on that loss last week to the Bengals, where they really did a solid job in the second half, shutting down the Bengals' passing attack. There's a lot of good components on that team, whether it's the secondary, the linebackers are showing out. Jordan Brooks had a lot of great energy in this game and almost looked like Bobby Wagner, which is, I might be getting ahead of myself now, but that's what it looked like. On the defensive line, playing a factor as well. Boye Mafe, right at the end of the half on second down, he effected a pass from Josh Dobbs, and then on third down, he got the big sack to push them further out of field goal territory, and the Arizona Cardinals ended up not going for a field goal and coming up with 0 points before the half on that possession. So different aspects of the defense are clicking right now, but we'll get to our offensive and defensive players of the games. I was getting ahead of myself, but we'll talk about it now. Jake Bobo is my player of the game on the offensive side of the football. Could have gone with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He had more yards receiving-wise. Had the same amount of touchdowns with Bobo as one. But you see this photo here taken by photographer Dean Rutz. The excellent toe tap on that touchdown there in the second quarter was massive. That was big. It looked in real time as if he had just barely missed it, but upon challenge from Pete Carroll went 2 for 2 on challenges in this game, both of them coming in the first half. Seattle would get that to count. It was Bobo's second career touchdown. Both of them have been toe tap touchdowns. And this, if it was fitting, because it capped off a drive where Tyler Lockett had a bunch of catches, and Bobo said he wanted to be like Tyler a few weeks ago. So excellent performance by the rookie. He was the highest graded player for Seattle, according to Pro Football Focus. So a massive game there. And then I talked about him a little bit earlier when I was talking about the game itself. On the defensive side of the ball, I went with Jordan Brooks. Brooks, coming off of the ACL injury, there were questions. Is he going to be able to be at the same level, or is he going to be able to be better, considering how early in his career that he is? What's he going to look like? Is he going to have rust? A lot of questions surrounding him, considering that his contract is coming to an end here, and he's been electric this season, especially considering that he's coming off of a short recovery from that ACL injury. In this game, 9 total tackles, 6 solo tackles, half a sack in this one, 2 tackles for loss, 1 pass deflection, and 1 quarterback hit. So he continues to look good alongside Bobby Wagner. What a dream combo it is to have them back in the middle of that defense. Inactives, I mentioned DK missing that game. Linebacker Devin Bush was a healthy scratch in this one. DK was out. Cornerback Artie Burns. The team was without running back Zach Charbonnet. As a result, Kenneth Walker III took every carry for Seattle in this game. He had a solid game. He had a 100-yard rushing performance in this one, and he was able to show off that jump cut ability in addition to running guys over, which makes him such a fun back to have. Such an agile runner of the football, but also a guy who's going to run in your face. Offensive guard Phil Haynes was not able to go. He's been one of your starters. And center Evan Brown also not able to go. So you're missing 2 starters once again on this line. You're already without Abraham Lucas at the right tackle position. So at the center position, at least, it was the draft pick Olu Oluwatimi out of Michigan, who came in and played a decent game. And then the last inactive, as you can see on your screen, offensive tackle Raekwon O'Neal. The only injury to report out of this game, thankfully, obviously, some of these games, and especially early on in the season, we've had different injuries stack up, let alone the Seahawks, as well as across the NFL. The only notable one, and the only one that Pete Carroll would mention, was that linebacker Uchenna Nwosu left the game with a pectoral injury. He was questionable to return to this game. He never did. So he didn't return, which isn't necessarily the best news, but considering where this game was and Seattle had control of it for most to all of that second half, probably best to just sit him. So we should hear more of that throughout the course of the week here. Hopefully it's better news than not, just considering where Seattle is injury-wise and how many guys that they have banged up in terms of starter quality. So, I mean, this is a game that, again, whether it was betting odds or the media had as a blowout, just considering Arizona's record and the talent on that roster. But the divisional games are always tough in the NFC West, whether it's when the Rams were bad, when the Cardinals were bad, those are always going to be tough. Also, the fact that these games between Seattle and Arizona always kind of end up being funky. Obviously, the 6-6 tie a few years ago down in Arizona comes to mind. So, you had to do your best to ensure that this wasn't a trap game of any sort, and you needed to bounce back after that tough, tight loss against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. You're able to do that, and you're able to stay mostly, knock on wood, healthy, which is good. So you're trying to get some of those guys back. Phil Haynes and Evan Brown were sort of questionable if they were going to be good to go. They ended up not being able to. And again, your offensive line depth continues to step in, which is so big. Talking about depth and that of the sort, we get to team-related news. There's only some roster moves this past week, nothing big. Jason Peters was practicing as a guard in this week leading into the game. He did not get any of the game action that we were able to see. On October 18th, the team signed wide receiver Cody Thompson off the practice squad. In addition to that, they signed wide receiver Cody White and offensive tackle Greg Island to the practice squad. As a corresponding move, quarterback Holton Allers was released from the practice squad to make room. 3 days later, preparing for this game, the team signed center Joey Hunt off the practice squad. So an old familiar face, someone who did start games for Seattle at a center a few years ago, was called up with the uncertainty of Evan Brown being able to go. Another Brown was signed. Offensive guard Ben Brown was waived. Well, it wasn't signed. He was waived as a corresponding move. And then 2 players were elevated off the practice squad ahead of this game against the Cardinals. Wide receiver Aesop Winston, who got 2 snaps in this game, and running back Sir Roderick Thompson. So the biggest thing for this Seattle team going forward, of course, is going to be health. You get that offensive line back to where it should be, and it's going to be hard to go against this Seattle Seahawks team, whether it's running the football or getting Geno Smith time to pass. Uchenna Nwosu, your arguable best pass rusher, you need to hear back from that, hopefully sooner rather than later. But with this matchup coming up against Cleveland is going to be really interesting, because I'm not so much worried about how your defense is going to be able to perform. They've been showing up great the last 2 weeks against 2 offenses that are very different on several levels, whether it be talent-wise or experience-wise. But you look at the defensive side of things for your opponent here, and Myles Garrett in Cleveland are coming into town. And maybe not so much the rest of Cleveland defense. They do have some solid players, whether it be Denzel Ward in the secondary. Myles Garrett is the number one guy that I'm worried about causing havoc along this offensive line, depending on how many guys are healthy. Even when healthy, he's going to be a problem. So that's going to be a big factor. That is the next game. That is week 8, October 29th versus the Cleveland Browns here at Lumen Field. This is a 1:05 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. This is on Fox. The Seahawks will be wearing their 1990s themed throwback jerseys for this one, the lone time this season they're doing so. Cleveland quarterback Deshaun Watson did not finish the last game, but should be fine for this contest, depending how the week of practice goes. And again, Myles Garrett is a huge factor to watch in this game, even if Seattle's offensive line is totally healthy, which is unlikely, considering that reports from Pete Carroll said that Abraham Lucas is unsure going into this game. Myles Garrett is going to be someone that Seattle is going to heavily game plan against going into this week 8 matchup.